Hey guys, Heather here from Tye-Dyed Iguana, and today we're going to talk a little bit about flipped over tortoises. And who better to talk about it with than our big guy Frank down here. Now today we're going to talk a little bit about why tortoises flipped over on their back, why it can actually be bad for them. And we're going to talk about a few things that cause them to flip over and ways that you can prevent it. So let's go check that out. Now, one of the reasons why being flipped over can be really bad for a tortoise is because if you think about their anatomy, their lungs kind of lay closer to the top of the shell. So under all this and another layer and everything, they've got their lungs. And then underneath all that are the rest of their organs. Now, if you think about it, if they flip over on their back, just think, especially in a species like this, the sulcata tortoise, think about the weight of all those organs pressing down on their lungs if they're upside down. Now, that's not too good, is it? No, it's not. So that can be really hard on their lungs. It can cause them not to be able to breathe right, especially for big species like these guys. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why it's bad for them to be on their backs, is because of all that pressure, and it can damage them. And another thing that can happen to these guys is that when they get flipped over, and if they're not flipped over the right way, kind of in the direction that they flipped from, these guys' intestines, they can kind of get twisted. So that's another dangerous thing that can happen to these guys, especially with your larger species like the sulcatas and like Galapagos tortoises in zoos and aldabras in zoos, stuff like that. So that is another thing that is pretty bad. Now, if you've got young tortoises and you've got a pretty deep water dish, flipping over can also be dangerous, especially if they land upside down in the water dish. Now, these guys, we actually have a rock here, so they can't do that. But if you have a really small tortoise that flips over in a water dish, it may end up drowning if it can't get its head above the water. And that can happen to larger tortoises too if they land in a body of water deep enough. So if you can't get their head out of the water, if they're upside down, they can't move out of the water, of course. So they'd be in big trouble. Yes, they would. And last but not least, if they would flip themselves over and wouldn't be able to move out of their hot spot, they could end up overheating themselves. And if you don't check on them often enough, they could end up overheating and dying, actually. So that's another thing you gotta look out for. And that can happen to bigger tortoises too, not just smaller ones. They can get overheated. And yeah, it's just one of the other dangers of flipping over. Yeah. Alright, now on to the different things that can cause them to flip over. First and foremost, they can flip over because they're trying to mate with a female and they fall off. One of the big culprits of this is our redfoot tortoise Bill. He will very often breed with Beth, and sometimes he just kind of tips over and can't get himself back up. Because our male sulcata tortoise, because he likes to try to mate with a female a lot, sometimes he'll accidentally flip over if he falls off of her back after mounting her. And that's when we usually find him flipped over. And we usually notice it pretty much right away. And we always make sure to gently flip him back. You don't want to just shove them over and have them roughly land, because then that can hurt their legs. You gotta be really gentle about it, especially with these larger species. Yeah, we always try to make sure that he never spends a lot of time on his back, because that is not good for him. Another cause of flipping over we see with this guy is when he tries to climb out of the cage. Usually he'll stand on his little tippy toes right there, and he'll try to get out. One time we even caught him there. He actually got out and went up there. But a lot of the time he'll just fall backward if he tips over too much. And that's when we gotta right him again. This guy is demonstrating right here what happens. I had a feeling that was going to happen, but this is what happens. This is kind of shows you a way that they can flip over is by climbing. If they climb on something and they fall, they can flip themselves over, as you just saw. Now we're gonna go ahead and pick him up. That was not scripted, by the way. He decided to do that by himself. So we went ahead and ride him. He would probably have been able to get himself righted again, but I decided to make it easy on him. But just imagine if that was closer and it didn't have the rock in there, he'd kind of be in trouble. So, for sure. And then, of course, sometimes the girls in here are a little naughty, and they will flip each other over. Sometimes they'll shove into one another and just kind of push them out of the way, and sometimes it ends up tipping them over as well. So, yeah, it's definitely another reason why these guys can get upside down, is if another tortoise kind of flips them over. Yeah, especially if you get two males together. Like if we put in a male in here with Bill, he would probably get really mad and they'd probably try to tip each other over. It's just how they fight. Now, as far as how they right themselves again, usually you'll find with tortoises, the more domed their shell is, the easier a time they have of flipping themselves back over. They can and will, as long as they have something to grip onto with their feet, kind of push off on. Like we got some nice bark in here, we got some rocks and stuff for them to push against that'll help them right themselves if they decide to flip over. One of them actually flipped over in its water dish today. Its head was above the water though, so it was all good. But it was having a little trouble, so we helped it out. But yeah, most of the time they can get themselves righted, except if they don't have anything to grip onto. Kind of like our sulcata tortoises, they can't really flip themselves back. But if we ever see a tipped over tortoise, we always tip it back over ourselves so it's right side up. We don't try to, they get kind of stressed out when they flip over, so we don't want it to be too hard on them. And then sometimes you'll see in viral videos that these guys will flip each other back over. If another one sees another one flipped upside down, sometimes they'll just rush over and push it until it flips back on right side up. So some people think it's cooperation, some people think it's just them being rivals or whatever, just trying to push them out of their territory. But yeah, it can be either or. As far as how you can keep these guys from flipping themselves over in the first place, there's a few things you can do. Now you see our enclosure here has 90-degree corners and everything. Sometimes they can get themselves flipped over from climbing on these corners. So if you build a more circular enclosure for your tortoise, that'll help it out, keep it from getting in those corners and flipping over. Also, to deter climbing that would cause them to tip over, make sure the walls of their enclosure are kind of tall enough so they can't really see over them. These guys, they can't see over them, and make sure that they're not see-through, because if they see like too much through them or see the outside, if they have an unobstructed view, they'll be more likely to climb and want to try to get out. That's another reason why we place different objects in there for them to kind of climb over. It kind of obstructs their view. And if you're having trouble with your male tortoise flipping over because he's trying to breed with a female, you can separate them into separate enclosures. That way you don't have to worry about him tipping over when he tries to breed with her. And then one way you can help them from getting stuck upside down when they do tip over is to give them a nice firm substrate they can push off against to right themselves. You don't want really loose bedding. You want more firm bedding like what we have in here. It's nice and firm, doesn't have much give, and they can push off against it to help themselves flip back over if they need to. So yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed watching, and we'll see you next time.